Can you buy a hard to find comic book, maybe even improve it and sell it for more money, or might you lose money? We're going to take a look at some examples and things to be careful about up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. I am a little bit under the weather. I'm going to do a fairly brief video today because I came across some interesting things when I was doing research for one of my CGC census videos. And what I wanted to talk about was buying something that is fairly rare in order to flip it for a profit. It's a dangerous game, right? Because you don't know exactly what the market is going to bear. You could even look at a recent sale on, let's say, Heritage Auctions, and we're going to use a lot of Heritage Auctions examples here, and see that, oh, well, it just sold for $7,000. Well, in order for it to get to $7,000, two people need to think that it's worth almost $7,000, right? Because if there's only one bidder, right, if the second most interested party only thought it was worth $5,000 to sell for $5,000. Now the person, maybe that bought it for $7,000 doesn't want anymore. Maybe the person that was the under bidder got a copy elsewhere. So you do have to be careful for books that are common, but very desirable, like an ASM 300 or a New Mutants 98 or a Hulk 181. There's going to be a market. You're going to be able to find a buyer. But for something that is much more niche, you need to find the buyer, right? And this is true of Golden Age. It's true of weird variants and error things and, ashcans. And we're going to take a look at some examples of those in this video. So what I want to do is take a look at a few examples. We'll take a look first at something where it worked out. And then we'll take a look at the counterexample. So my first example here, this is, I'm looking at GP analysis. This is New Mutants 98, a Mark Jeweler insert in a 9.8. Okay. This is from 1991, which is very late in the Mark Jewelers game. So it's fairly rare to find. So especially in a 9.8, right? So we can see here somebody actually in 2023 was able to get, number one, they got a great deal, right? A copy in February of a Mark Jeweler 9.8 had sold for $16,000. They got one for $3,000 and were able to sell it for $12,700. Made a big profit. If they bought it for $16,000 and only sold it for $12,700, they would have taken a loss. So there's a lot of volatility in this. I mean, we're talking like, $16,000 to $3,000 to $12,000 to $7,000, all over the place. So, I mean, if you had a copy of this, what might it be worth? What would this sell for today? I doubt it would even make it to $7,000 because remember, 2024, you're leading up to the film, right? What month is that? July, right? Right around the time that the film came out. So there you have an example where somebody was successful. But now here's an example. And this is the one I came across that had me thinking. This is the Tick #1 ashcan edition. So this was basically just 8.5 by 11 paper stapled together, right? 3 staples put in the side by like somebody with a stapler. I don't even think this was sent to a printing press in order to secure the trademark, right? New England Comics, which is a chain of comic book stores in New England, they, the first they had the Tick as kind of their mascot, and then Ben Edlund? Is that the fellow's name? Who is the creator? I just want to take a closer look at this. This is Ben Edlund. This is a 9.4. Okay. So they bought it for $6,600. Now you also probably have to pay some tax and some shipping, but let's just say $6,600 they had to pay for this. And the greater notes, it's not on the label, which was potentially clever of the buyer noting that it was an autograph deemed authentic on page 1, but I don't know how they got this. Probably, well, actually, no, the greater notes might have come later. We're going to get to that, right? That it was an authenticated autograph. Only 5 copies certified by CGC. I think 2 universal, 3 signatures, and 1 restored. And these numbers have changed because they bought it for $6,600. And the cert number was, if we take a look, 389-986-6003. This is certified by JSA. 389-986-6003. So I'm imagining that they had CGC crack this open and then get it graded because they kept the cert number. Most of the JSA, because it's something that CGC's been doing recently, have more recent cert numbers in the 45-4600 or 45-46, whatever, as the first 2 digits, let's say. So this sold, and how much later is this? The original sold in April 2025 for $6,600. This sold in September for $4,800. They lost $1,800. And they also had to pay a seller's premium on this, whatever they had to pay in terms of taxes of shipping on the original $6,600 purchase. Now, if they're a reseller, they might have had a resale certificate. You don't have to pay the state sales tax on it, at any rate. So, and if we look here, and this is maybe now that it doesn't even say, the Ben Edlund authenticated autograph on page 1. So he signed it on the interior of the first page, which is very common, really, prior to CGC, prior to 2000. And that's why it always pays to check older books. So, and it kept the same grade of 9.4, but an $1,800 loss. Because what was there to compare it to? How did you know that $6,600 was a good deal? And how did you have any idea what you could sell it for with an authenticated autograph? Okay. I'm going to look at another one. And we don't have a follow-up sale here. This is Turtle Mania Special number 1. This is by Metropolis Comics, right? So this is a book. Eastman and Laird did the cover and art. And there was also a gold edition of this. A couple of years into the Turtle franchise. So the census, if we go down here, is 228.98. The problem is, this is a very niche book. There's only 28 out of them there. Is there going to be a seller for this? Because I was talking to a dealer at New York Comic Con that had, I think he had actually the gold edition on his wall. Maybe it was this that was signed. And there are very few of them. The gold, right? There's a gold edition. That's the rare one that sold for $66,000. Yeah, I think this was the one I was talking about. There's 1 signature series, 6 qualified, and 2 restored. Now, why is this qualified? Right? 3 names, sketch, and 10 out of 10 written on back cover in pen and marker. So if we look at the back cover, right? Peter Laird, and it's dated 5/4/86. There are only 10 of these made. This is the one I was talking about. Bob Burden, who had a Flaming Carrot story, but he did one of the Turtles on the back cover, and Kevin Eastman in 1986. This book is super rare. Now, would you pay, and this was sold in 2022, so I understand, height of the market and such. Would you pay for this? Right? What would you pay for this, knowing that you could get a JSA authentication rather than a green label? I don't think it really matters, because there are only in total 10 of these. 9 have been, 2 of them are restored. 9 of them are in the census, and there's 1 in the hands of somebody, right? So this is an ultra rare book. Does JSA versus green label make a difference? Now, I do believe that if you see a green label and you can get it for, let's say, half of what it's worth, right, for a regular book, an ASM 300 or something of that nature, right? Or even better, a book that's signed by Stan Lee on the first page, or Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko. And then you can turn around and get the gold label JSA authentication. You're going to get a much you're going to get a great bump in value, right? Actually, it wouldn't be on the first page. If it was on the first page, it would get a blue label. If it's on the cover, the signature on the cover gets a green label as qualified, or used to before JSA authentication. But you're going to have to take that into account. You have to be able to, I think, buy it for a green label price. Anyway, let's take a look at another book in terms of people following the hype for something that is rare. And this was Detective Comics number 140, the first appearance of the Riddler, 9.6. This sold in 2021 as part of the Promise Collection. If you remember, the Promise Collection was this big pedigree that had come out. Two brothers. One was drafted into the armed services during the Korean War. The other brother enlisted in order to look out for him. I think it was the drafted brother. I forget the order of the brothers, but one brother said, if anything happens to me, you have to promise to look after my funny books. Unfortunately, the brother who was the comic book collector was killed in action. The other brother kept that promise for many years until his passing. And then the family found it and found that they had a collection worth worth millions of dollars. I think the whole thing might have been worth $10 million in terms of the sales on Heritage, right? But at any rate, the census, right? 196, none higher, single highest graded, pedigree with a great story behind it. It was one of the two that tied for the record sales, along with the Matt Baker Phantom Lady cover in the Promise Collection sale. But this was 2021. You're just like, the market's just taking off. And somebody bought this for $456,000. Now, what could you compare it to? There was nothing that, had the to compare it to. Even the 9.4s, how often do they sell? Let's take a quick look. Right? The 9.4, the last sold for $19,000 in 2003. Right? 2014. Yeah, I mean, there's like a pedigree of a 7.5. There's nothing really to draw a good comparison to figure out what is a reasonable price to pay for the book. So people got excited by top of census, the story of the pedigree, paid nearly $500,000. But I guess whoever bought it didn't want to hold on to it. So they sold it. Wait, there's a different sale. When did they sell? They sold this darn thing. There we go. 2 years later for $360,000. So they basically rented it for 2 years for the cost of $96,000 plus taxes and fees and whatever, the seller premium and what have you. Yeah. So, the market had started to cool off by then. The sky's the limit. The Promise Collection copy crosses the auction block. No, the sky used to be the limit, wasn't anymore. Let's go to another one. This is a Pulp, and I've seen this in hand. So Weird Tales, number 118. This is probably the most desirable cover buy of a Pulp. A 2.0 sold last year for $4,900. There's a 0.5 there too. Most of the books are in higher grade than that. So how do you know that this is a good price? Let's compare it, right? If we look at, here we go. There hasn't been, at least on Heritage, anything that has sold for close to that, right? The lowest grade is a 4.5 that sold for $7,800, right? Well, if a 4.5 and a 5.0 for $7,500, 5.5 for $7,200, 5.0 for $6,900, right? Yeah. So how much less is a 2.0 compared to a 5.0? I have to think that it's, going from 7,000 to just under 5,000. I think it's going to be a bigger drop than that. So when you have the only recorded sale what can you compare it to in terms of trying to sell it? You know, I would imagine if this went on Heritage, I don't think it's getting $4,900. Let's look at, what am I looking at? Oh, I wanted to look at another Mark Jeweler, and this is which did I pull up? A 9.0 of Amazing Spider-Man 129, the first appearance of the Punisher, because I did find 2 Mark Jewelers that sold. So I'm going to go back to 2023. A Mark Jeweler sold for $3,901 at the end of 2023. So you're talking about the very end of the boom, as things are cooling off the following year. What did it sell for? $3,150. The one sold in June for $4,000. So they probably held on to it a little too long. It probably, you know, maybe you try to sell for $4,000. You can't get that because people aren't paying that anymore, and it kind of bottoms out. So those are things that you have to be careful of when you're buying something unique that you're not buying for yourself. The thing is, books that are rare, like Golden Age books especially, or odd, you know, ashcans and strange variants, very high grade books of Mark Jewelers or whatever the case might be. If you want to be the one that owns it, when it comes time to sell it, is somebody else going to want it as much as you did for the money? I think you have to be really, if you're looking to potentially sell it in the short term, you have to be really conservative about what you're going to pay for it. Because if you pay what you want to pay for it with the intent to sell it, you're going to find somebody else who's willing to pay that much for it. You know, and I know, like Ryan with Automatic Comics says this all the time, is if you're going to spend more than $100 ever on a comic book with any regularity, get a pricing tool. They're fairly easy to find. You know, I use GPA, I use Cover Price, I use to a lesser extent Go Collect, because it gives you information, it gives you fair market value. You can get an idea of what the book is worth, and you can take a look at it over time. Right? Is this a book that's value is decreasing? Its value is increasing? Is it a graded book where there are plenty of copies out there that are increasing the supply of the graded book? A lot of other variables, but here we're talking about things that, and I think what I think of is Golden Age, right? If you're hunting for a Golden Age book and you see it and you want it, it's very difficult to say no. Because if I go to a show, right, I went to New York and I saw 2 books that I really want for the personal collection, but they were out of the budget that I was allocating at the time, right? It was a Detective Comics 20, the first appearance of the Crimson Avenger, and was it 23, his first cover appearance. The 20 was a 3.5. They wanted $10,000, and the first cover was a 7.5 conserved. Now, I looked at the 3.5 Universal, and I saw that it was part of the Christine Farrell Complete DC collection. I should have jumped on it then. It was probably sold for like $7,000 something on Heritage. That obviously the dealer bought that copy. I can't say, well, the last sale was $7,000. You do $6,500 because they're going to be losing money, right? How many are out there? If I really want that book, I'm going to have to pay up for it. And at some point in time, because it's going to be part of my personal collection, you know, it's still going to be a rare book when I decide, or, you know, my heirs decide to get rid of that book. Hopefully it will, you know, not really decrease in value. It's, I mean, a 1939 Detective Comics. So that remains to be seen. That's, you know, those are the kinds of things that when you're looking for Golden Age, you have to consider, is like, when is this going to come around anymore? And then you can look at pricing tools to see how often these books come around. You can look at the CGC census to see how many graded books are out there. So anyway, just be careful and think about that if you're going to buy a rare book, even those books that you think you can increase the value by getting the signature series. If there are few enough of them out there, there's not a difference between the green and the gold label, I think, for collectors, except maybe people will buy the green label and get the gold label themselves. For a standard book, yeah, there is a difference. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for stopping by. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying, until next time, enjoy your comics.